Hi, welcome to part 2 where I'm going to look at constructors and also the static variable. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a little refresher on what we've done so far. So I have a bank account class. It's used for creating actual bank account objects where you can specify what the person's name is, their account number is, and what their balance is going to be. What I'm going to do here in main is I'm going to create another bank account object. So I'm just going to print out just a few asterisks just so what we can see separating our new work, and I'm going to create a new bank account object. So bank account, the name of the class, an instance name that I want to call it, equals new and bank account. And the round brackets there are calling a constructor. I'm going to type one up in a minute and just explain what's happening there. Now ba2 dot. So I have access to set the name. So we'll just call this one the name John. Set account number, we'll just pass in an account number there. And finally, BA2 dot, okay, the previous one I sent in a string there, that should be an int, so I'm just going to get rid of the curly brackets. BA2 dot and deposit some money. Now to test that any of that worked, what I'm going to do, actually firstly, I'm just going to draw up a diagram for that, so I'll just pause it while I do that. Okay, so as a result of my line 26, BA2 is a reference variable to an object in memory. When you create a new object, you get new memory. The memory you get is a copy of each of the member variables. So name, default value of null, account number, default value of 0, balance, a default value of 0.0. When I say ba.setName, so I'm just going to ruin this with arrows all over the place now, that calls the setName method, which sends in the name John. So name here becomes John. Here, John gets assigned to this currently executing object's name. The current object that I'm referring to is BA's object. So that will change the name from there, from, ooh, this is fairly, fairly big, to John. We better do it right and put in a capital letter. Now, second one, set account number. So that sends in that account number into the set account number method. It checks to see is it within range. This time I'm pretty sure it is. And it takes the number that I've passed in and assigns it to this, the current object that I'm working on, its account number. So that's the one referenced by BA2. So account number there will change from 0 to, write this underneath one, 4. I just counted the zeros there. And finally the balance, so 1200 gets sent in or deposit into the deposit method, goes in here. So 1200 gets added onto the balance. The balance of the current object is 0.0. So 1200 gets added onto that, and then that amount, 1200, gets assigned to the current object's balance. So here it won't be 0.0 anymore, it'll be the new figure of 1200. Okay, so that has fully set up the new object, the bank account, and assigned John the balance, or the bank account number and the balance. Okay, I'm just going to write in some code there to print those out. I will pause it while I do that. So I've put in 4 printouts here, the bank account details, to print that out the name. So to get the name of the last object that I've created, I need ba2 dot. I need to call the method getName. I don't have access to the member variable because it's private, so getName will return that member variable to me. Bank account number, again, use ba2, that's my reference to that object. Get account number, that will retrieve the account number that was set there on line 33. And I'm using a printf here so that I can round off the balance and put a euro symbol in, make it look pretty, to 2 decimal places. And again, I'm calling the getBalance method on ba2. Now if I run that, just to see the printout there, and everything is okay. Now next, what I'm going to do is show you constructors, how to create them. So on line 26, new bank account, that is calling a constructor. A constructor is a method in the class that's the same name as the class, and it's used for setting up the object in memory, and you can create constructors to take in values. Essentially, I'm going to have a constructor that'll allow me to send in the name, it'll create the account number, and allow to deposit some money or not. I'll show you that. All in one line. So all in one line of code here in main instead of having 3 lines. So it's faster to set up an account. Okay, so I said that every class here, that is calling a constructor. I haven't put any in. I haven't even showed you what a constructor is. But if you don't put any constructors in your class, the compiler will insert a default constructor for you. So if I type one in, it's not called the default constructor anymore. It'll be called a no-args constructor, but there is a constructor provided by the compiler for your class. Okay, I'm going to type one in and show you what it looks like. It won't be known as the default one anymore because I physically typed it in. It'll be called the no-args. It's public. Constructors never have a return type. It's the same name as the class. Empty brackets and a set of curly brackets. That is a no-args constructor. Okay, just going to write, or I'll comment these actually in a minute. I'm going to pop in another constructor. So public bank account. This time I'm going to have this one take in a string for the name, and let's put in a double as well for an amount to deposit. Now, so these are going to allow me to create a bank account object and pass in the name and the amount. Now, I need to make sure that that name that's passed in, that gets assigned up to the member variable, and the amount somehow gets added on there to the balance. So what I'm going to do here is call the methods underneath. I have a method for set name. I'm going to pass the name there, and I have a deposit method as well, and pass the amount down. Now, what have I done wrong here? Okay, I've just noticed here, should have noticed this earlier, my deposit takes in an int, and that should actually be a double, and my withdraw takes in, that should be a double as well. And my get balance, do I have that as a double? I do. Okay, so it's just a mistake from earlier. Now, because I have that constructor here, I'm going to create a third object over here now. Bank account BA3 equals new bank account. Now you can see I have 2 constructors, one that takes nothing and one that takes 2 values. I just might note here as well, if I did not type in that no-args constructor, I would no longer get the default one that was provided by the compiler. I'll show you that there in a second. So I'm going to call a constructor that takes in 2 values. So we'll have this for Mary's bank account, and how much does she want in? We put in 1,500 there into her account. So the constructor allows you to set up initial values when the class is created. I'm just going to take out this constructor. Now, I'm not going to remove it up completely. I'm going to comment it out just to prove to you. So that's no longer typed in. If you don't type in this is a no-args constructor. No-args constructor. If you don't type in a no-args constructor, you don't get one anymore if you type in another one. This is the only constructor that I can now use to create a bank account object. And by commenting out that no-args constructor, my code over here doesn't work. And I am going to delete that one for a second. So now there are no constructors in the class. You don't put any in, you will get the one provided by the compiler. So that's just something to watch out for there. So don't put in any constructors. You get one called the default constructor provided by the compiler. If you do type in a constructor and you want the one that takes no arguments, you'll need to physically type it in yourself. Okay, I can as well put in another constructor here if I wanted to, bank account, and pass in, say, just the name. String the name, and to make sure that that gets set. And in the first one there, I've called the set name method. I could, if I wanted to, call or set the member variable directly. The reason that I would do that is if there wasn't any validation taking place here, well, then I don't need to call the set name method. But if maybe I went along and made sure that the name couldn't be over 50 characters, that would happen in here. well, then it'd be better that I did call the setName method in the constructor as opposed to setting it directly like I've done there. And I'm going to pop back in that noargs constructor back in there. Okay, so now when I create my bank account here, BA3, I can pass in Mary and I can deposit an amount as well. Now I'm just going to print out the values here and just pause for a second while I type that in. Now I've typed in two things here. I've typed in my printouts to give me back the name just to check that it said it okay, and a printout for the balance. I'll just run that to show you a little issue with it. So there is Mary, name, Mary and balance. The reason that name is stuck to the previous balance is that I used a printf, and a printf doesn't give a new line. So I'm going to pop in a \n, which must be inside the double quotes, to give the new line there for the previous printout to get the space there. There we have. What else I've done there is I've rearranged the constructors. I just like them in the order of no parameters. There I have one parameter, then two parameters, and I've added in this third constructor. The third constructor takes the name, the account number, and the amount to deposit. So different constructors allow you to set up different parameters at the time of creation, and you can choose whichever one you want. What I'm going to do now is introduce you to a static variable. So I'm going to put a static variable up here, static int num of bank accounts created. Now I'm going to make it public so that I can access directly from outside the class. So something that is, and my spelling's brutal, something that's static, it doesn't belong to the objects that are created. So right now I've created a BA1 object here equals new, anywhere with a new keyword. I've created another one here and new keyword, and another one down here. I have 3 objects created, so anywhere I have the new keyword, and to create an object I have to call the constructor. Something that's static. The first bank account, it only has 3 member variables, so with my little diagram here, it doesn't have a copy of that static variable. Same second one, doesn't have a copy, same the third one. Something that's static belongs to the class and never to the objects that are created. So I've done an example here that it's going to count the number of bank accounts that have been created. So the only way I can create objects is by calling the constructor, whichever constructor gets called. So I need to make sure over here that that static variable gets incremented no matter how I create the bank account, no matter which constructor that I create. So the way to do this is pop, so number of bank accounts created, ++, that makes sure that 1 is added on. Now, I need to make sure that that gets called. It will get called from my first bank account, it will get called from the second one, it won't get called from the third constructor. So what I need to do in the other constructors, I need to make sure that they call a constructor that doesn't take any parameters, and the way that you do that is with the keyword this and round brackets. So this is basically then gets replaced with the name of the class. So call the constructor with no parameters. So when that's executing, if I call the constructor here, Mary with the string and the double, it will call the constructor with no parameters first, which will increment the bank account, and then it will go back and set the name and the deposit amount. Okay, I'm just going to put in some extra printouts. I'll pause it while I do that. I've added in 3 printouts. I'm printing out the static counter. The way you should reference something that's static is the name of the class that it's in and the name of the static variable, because it belongs to the class, not to the objects. So I have 3 of these after each object that I've created. And when I run that, you'll see there after the first one, number of bank accounts, it's 1, it's 2, and it's 3. So that is a static variable. It belongs to the class and each object does not get a copy of it, and you access it by the name of the class dot the name of the static variable.